Do more is a call to action for all Australians to be allies, making the commitment to become more informed, more educated, and more engaged in creating positive change to challenge racism. This conversation series seeks to make change through storytelling. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community, and what we learn through storytelling culture of the longest continuous civilization on the planet. We pay our respect to elders, past and present.
I'm Linda Marigliano, and I'm having this conversation about doing more with Sky Thomas. Hi, Sky.
Hi.
We are getting your story today. We're going to be talking about do more as well. And you are someone that is so wonderfully proactive within society. There's a lot of measures that we're going to be taking note of for things that people can be doing more in terms of moving forward in 2020. But I would love to start with something that is quite broad, and that is the story of you and how racism has shown up throughout your life, Sky.
One of my earliest memories of racism was me and children who were throwing rocks and bark at us and told us that, abos weren't allowed to play here. And I think I was like 6 or 5 when that happened. And that was like a continuous thing. Either it be very external, where it was verbal, or it was violent in some form, or it was when I moved into private school, it kind of gave me a more sort of broader understanding of what kinds of racism there was, because as I said, in my earlier childhood, living in country towns or in spaces where it just, people were very external about their racism, where coming into private school kind of gave me more of that idea of, those backhanded comments and those stereotyping. And like I said before, it made me see a lot of what other people would experience as well, and kind of like the effects of racism.
Like when you're 6 years old and someone calls you a horrible name and throws things at you, how did you feel?
It's quite disheartening, because it was like from such an early age, it was pushed into my whole existence of being proud and being, happy with who you are and where you come from. And, coming from one of the oldest cultures in the world, and, having my elders and my family members, talk about the pride that we should have to come from that and to be a part of this land. And then to kind of have people turn that against you, like the one thing that you're, that is probably like the center of who you are is not only not good enough, but hated.
Sky, I would love for you to explain the idea of what colorism is and how perhaps it needs to be dismantled.
So I think on like a global scale, colorism talks about how there's like a dysphoria between, Black people who, are either darker skinned or, would have more prominently Black features compared to somebody who is lighter skinned, who might have, more European features. It's very prevalent, I think, all over the world. We see it a lot in, I think we see heaps in like American media, where, you'd see something as simple as like the dark Black girl in a movie being the loud, obnoxious, more masculine, more aggressive, where it's the pretty mixed light-skinned girl is seen as more feminine, more soft, more attractive, more softer spoken. And it's not just, with women, it's with men as well. The idea that, men are more aggressive, or they're more, poor or ghetto, or they don't speak as well. Like it's the idea that, that sort of lighter look, depending on what that is more not only attractive, but more trustworthy, more educated, more inclined to be, you know, from money. Like, for an example, it was like seeing how the white Australian girls would like grade the attractiveness of mixed race Asian girls, talking about this is a good mix, you know, if you've got these kind of features, and then, you know, you're one of the weird looking mixed race girls if you've got not these features. It's a bit different here, I think, in Australia, just because with the Indigenous community, we have us come in so many different shades and colours and shapes, that I think within ourselves, we don't have as much internalized hate around colorism. Not saying that it doesn't exist, it still does, but, you know, I think because we understand the history of what our people went through, we understand that, you know, that your skin or your features or your shapes do not define the person that you are. Doesn't define, you know, your culture, doesn't, you know, disregard your connections to your community, to your history, to the land you come from in any ways. Like, I understand my privilege because I'm a bit, because I'm lighter skinned, I don't have, you know, darker features in any way, where I understand that people are at times would be more inclined to listen to what I have to say compared to, you know, one of my darker skinned sisters who would be saying the exact same thing in the exact same way. Being aware of that, sort of how colorism plays into that, like maybe, you know, looking at which voices are you listening to on, you know, on Instagram or Facebook, or, you know, in the mainstream media. Is it like, are you paying attention only to those people that are light skinned, that are, you know, that you feel like you have a proximity to? Or do you feel like you don't like listening to people who are darker skinned, or, you know, who talk in a certain way? And do you feel like maybe their accents or the slang that they use makes them sound less educated? Or, you know, do you feel like they're always emotional all the time and that's why you don't like listening to them? So I think it's also not only just educating others, but also unpacking all the stuff that we've been indoctrined into, but not like, believing about like people of color.
Can you explain the idea of a true ally and what real allyship within Australia looks like?
It's first and foremost not being compliant. It's understanding that, you know, if this could have been, you know, fixed in a way to say, you know, in terms of racism in this country, it would have been done by now, because the Indigenous community have been vocal from the beginning, ever since colonization happened here in this country. And it's because that others don't speak not only with us but on our behalf, you know, in their spaces. It's this idea of, you know, being compliant to what this society has indoctrined into its culture, that is, you know, racism. It's that understanding that at the end of the day, you know, like, we're 2% of the population, you know, it's strength in numbers, it's strength in power, and for a very small amount of people, it's not something that we can do on our own. We've been fighting for our rights since day one. I know that, like, in history books, they talk about how, you know, they colonized, but, you know, things were good and everything was dandy, and then the Federation happened. They completely whitewash and smooth over the whole history of what happened here, where it was like, not only were they extremely violent to our people, but they like conducted guerrilla warfare to commit national genocide of people. Like, when I have talks with people, I'm like, do you know about like them instilling like smallpox into our communities by, you know, tainting our water and, you know, giving us food and blankets as gifts, but they also had diseases and that on them because we didn't have the proper immune system for it. It wiped us out almost completely. Like, or there was a stolen generation where it was specifically conducted to indoctrinate Black children into communities as white people, and, you know, to assume that, you know, if we breed them in with the white community after like so many generations, they're not going to exist anymore. In a way, it's quite dehumanizing for a nation of people to have to plead with the rest of the community that we're not only worthy of living, but that we're humans as well. You know, it's an idea that we always have to, you know, not just by saying, hey, we want to be treated equally and we want the same opportunity and the same rights as everybody else. We have to, you know, we have to show you that evidence of our dead family members being killed by the police system or by a lack of healthcare concerns for our communities, that we have to continuously prove that our people are worthy enough to be considered humans, that we don't deserve to die in these certain ways and we don't deserve to get treated in these sort of ways.
So in terms of doing more, what are some ways that people can be more proactive in actually standing up and voicing their opinions?
I think it's definitely learning how to develop a voice first. I think, you know, especially in this time that we've come in, I've talked about it before, is that you need to be working on the strength of your voice. You know, it's that understanding of which topics and what you're talking about and having a deeper understanding of that. You know, like if you're going to be for the Black people of this country, you need to understand exactly what they want, what they need, what their past journey has been, so you can be a part of that sort of bricklaying of the new path that's going to be happening in the future. There's also getting rid of your ego around it as well, because a lot of the time there's, you know, I've had a lot of people talk about, you know, oh, like I don't want to be called out for this and I don't want to be wrong or I don't want to do the wrong thing. And it's just like, you're not going to understand what is the right way to go about things if you, one, don't have those conversations with the community that you apparently want to help, but also, you know, you can't learn if you don't have a couple stumbles on the way, and you need to be, you know, have a bit of humility in yourself to understand that you're not going to get it perfect. You're not going to get it right. And developing that, I think people also need to understand that as a community, you need to sort of strengthen kind of like your voice to your government, your local government, to your state government, because at the end of the day, these people get put into power because they apparently represent you. So, you know, it's like our local councils, they put forward initiatives and all that sort of stuff, depending on what their community around them wants. So it's like, these people are speaking on behalf of you, so tell them what to say. Tell them what you want them to be doing. And I think most of all, it's educating yourself. I think Australia's gotten by for so long being quite, and, you know, half of it being not their fault, but being quite ignorant to not only the history of this country, not just on Indigenous people, but on people of colour in this country, you know, since they started having, you know, migrants come in and all that sort of stuff. Like, people of colour have been treated like crap from like day one, and they still are. And understanding all of that history, but also understanding as well that idea of, I don't think people really understand the notion of like the reactions of actions. So, you know, people, for an example, talk about Indigenous people and how like this happened like 100 years ago, why are we worrying about it now? But it's like, you don't understand that one action has shockwaves through history that create ripples that still affect the community in some sort of way. you know, we live in a capitalist society, and, you know, money talks, you know. So if there are businesses that we know of, or specific people that we know of that, you know, that don't want to take part in this, who, you know, been quite racist in the past or continuously racist, we need to understand that it's not about, you know, buying the lesser of two evils anymore. Like, we live in such a huge platform of consumerism that, like, the product that you may want and that you know, you may want to have is going to be out there available for you. Maybe it might not have this specific brand on it that, you know, you may like, but it doesn't mean that you can't attain it in a different way. So I think, you know, looking at being able to support, you know, Black and Indigenous people through them kind of things, and, you know, buying not only their art, but we've got restaurants, we've got cafes, there's lots of clothing brands, there's shoes, there's, you know, children's toys, children's clothes. We've got all of that out there ready to be bought, but it's just like, you've got to actually go out and look for it.
What's one thing that you would like people to do more of moving forward?
Pick up the slack that you've been ignoring for the past 100 years. Like, we've been carrying this, and we're tired. Like, we're very tired. Things, you know, they've been getting better, but they're not good enough. You know, like, sitting around waiting for people to get, like, for people to do the right thing and policies to be put in place or whatever, or, you know, waiting for those Black people to break through into mainstream isn't good enough. Like, they're not going to get there if there's no support. They're not going to break down these systems if you're not helping them with it.
Sky, thank you so much for your time today. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Peace out.
Find ways you can do more at domoreproject.com.au.